Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Giving honor and praise unto the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular teaching, brothers and sisters, is not going to be long, but is going to be detailed. And what we're going to get into, brothers and sisters, is, as the title says, updated books available for those who want them, part 2. All right. Last night on this channel, we did part 1 of this presentation. And for those who are following along, we will begin to see, know, and understand that due to the timing, we had to break up the PowerPoint. That's why, if you noticed in the beginning of this, I had to go down to like slide number 33 in order to pick up where we left off from last time. So, brothers and sisters, without any further ado, we're going to get into this presentation. Now, when we look at this right here, it says, I'm going to sit there and make, brothers and sisters, with the laser pointer, where it says, make America white again. Make America white again.info. Now, let's look at this, brothers and sisters. I asked concerning this, when was America ever, quote, white? For 50 years. That was my question. When was America ever white? As in the way they showing in the pictures there, for just 50 years. Now, the America that we're talking about, brothers and sisters, is commonly understood as the United States of America. The United States of America came to be in 1776. While that year existed, there were still natives that were in this land. The original United States, brothers and sisters, consisted of what we understand as 13 colonies. Prior to that, it was called colonial America. And then we begin to see that other states began to be added on, such as Texas in like 1845, and Florida in the same year, and Oklahoma in 1908, and so forth and so on. California in 1850. You understand? So the point, brothers and sisters, to get into this particular aspect is that never was America just totally all white, certainly not for a 50-year stretch. So let's look at this, if we will. It says here in the notes, the natives who were in America were not white. The Vikings who came to America before Vespucci were by some people white. Now, the reason why I said, brothers and sisters, if we want to underline this for edification purposes, were by some people, because some state that the Vikings were white, some people state that the Vikings were not white. Now, that's something we want to point out. Now, when we speak about Amerigo Vespucci, we're talking about the person, brothers and sisters, that is credited as to why America got its name. That's one of the theories that has been purported. All right? So let's go on. It says, going back, if we will, to this particular part, it says, brothers and sisters, the people of the Inca, Aztec, Micmac were not white. Let's explore the Native American matter briefly, shall we? So this is something we're going to get into in regards briefly with the matter of the Native Americans. The Native American matter. Chickasaw, they lived in a place, brothers and sisters, today known as Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Choctaw, they live in a place that's today understood as Mississippi and Alabama. Creek, they lived in a place understood as Florida. Seminole, same area in Florida, because actually the Seminole was not talking about the ones who were runaway aspect from slavery, but the Seminole themselves, brothers and sisters that were in Florida, were descendants from the Creeks. Cherokee, lived in places that we call Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, Carolinas, Kentucky, and Alabama. Now, brothers and sisters, for those who are aware, you will know that Alabama was a tribe of the native people that lived in a place that we currently call Texas. All right. So this is just something we want to point out for edification purposes. Now, on the right-hand side, this is one of the pictures from Google Images when you start to look at the Native Americans. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say that all Native Americans look like this, but I want to sit there and point out, brothers and sisters, this very salient point here. All right. You see how we speak as Israelites, and a Jewish man, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't sit there and challenge the families of the Seleucids, the Ptolemies, the Caesars about the stuff that they took and so forth and so on during the raid of Jerusalem. Correct me if I'm wrong about them challenging them to get the stuff back that they would have been able to claim had they been the true Jews, if you will. They seem to be too comfortable in the land of Israel, brothers and sisters, with everything that goes on there. If you are the true people that the Torah talks about, so-called Jewish man, you are too comfortable with Islam. You are too comfortable with Christianity being in there. Whatever happened to the portion that you read in Deuteronomy or Devarim, where it goes into saying you shall smash their idols? Why are you not smashing their idols? It's because you know good and well that you got your own idols. That's why. So these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. You understand? The people that you see now on the reservations in many, many cases, why are you all accepting the tokenism casino that you are granted and given? If you are the descendants of those that had the treaties broken, if you are the descendants of those who were disrespected, burnt alive, hung upside down, such as was done by the Spaniards in California to the natives that were there, my question to those who are on the reservations is, why is it that you are so quick to sit there and accept the handout that the European American white man has offered to you in his government? And the theory that I'm presenting, brothers and sisters, is that the people that you see in these reservations are not the descendants of the natives that were slaughtered and massacred. That's the point that I want to point out. Because if you are, then you are nothing more than a big thing, what we black people will call a sellout or a Sambo or a coon. For you to even sit there and accept that, knowing the genocide that happened to your ancestors, if those were your ancestors. You understand? So let's go on, if we will, to the next slide. This person we see here in regards to the Native American matter, right? His name, and I want to put it in the group chat, Chief Straight Arrow. And you can look him up online. Now, he is part of the Shinnecock people, brothers and sisters, that you see in the place called Long Island today. There is no way, shape, form, or fashion that we can deny the quote Black Indians as they were known as by some. If we can still sit there and see them today looking as the person there is looking. Okay? So this is something we just want to point out for edification purposes in that particular regard. Next slide, please. The matter in Connecticut. In 1658, Blacks and Indians in Connecticut struck for freedom. This was when John Winthrop the Younger was governor of Connecticut. The person that you're seeing there, brothers and sisters, on the right-hand side is John Winthrop the Younger, who in the 1650s was the governor of Connecticut. And what history will show is that during his time as governor of Connecticut, you had Black people who were shipped from Africa and Indians, that is to say the natives of the land, that came together and struck for freedom. Now, brothers and sisters, what am I pointing out in this particular case? If they were together fighting on a common battle against a common enemy, then we can know and understand that the said mixture between the said African that was shipped to the United States and the indigenous people that were already here prior to said African ship there must have mixed among themselves. That's something we want to sit there and point out for edification purposes. If they're fighting a common enemy, my question is, in the 1650s, what were they doing after the fight? And I don't mean to sound carnal, but what was the said, for the lack of a better term, African and Indian doing in Connecticut after they struck for freedom? Common sense will tell you they came together and, if the lack of a better word, made it together. And this is why you find strains, if you want to put it in those terminologies, of said Native Americans within the so-called African American people. This is something that, though I speak primarily about the Atlantic slave trade coming west, I do not deny, as a brother and a historian, that the Atlantic slave trade went east. I do not deny, brothers and sisters, that the Atlantic slave trade started off going from Western Africa north into Portugal. I do not deny, brothers and sisters, that from East Africa, you had black people taking as slaves to what we call Iraq today, to what we call Vietnam today. Did you know that? Did you know that the sweetest banks was funded by the slave trade? The whole world benefited from our people's oppression. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. One of the things that I counteract in my videos, brothers and sisters, is the saying that because we see situations such as this with the guy that was named or is named Chief Straight Arrow, just because you had natives here who were beset as black does not mean that the Atlantic slave trade did not happen. That doesn't mean that they did not pick people up from Western Africa and brought them over here to the Americas as slaves and captives. Brothers and sisters, if you understand what went on and what's going on in Libya with the slave trade, with them, there were black people all over the face of the earth. So just because you find black people in Malaysia, black people in France, black people in Syria, black people in Mauritania, black people in Zimbabwe, and black people in Cuba prior to the Atlantic slave trade, that doesn't mean that the Atlantic slave trade did not happen. So when I speak upon this subject and the comments that many may present, such as saying, well, we have ancestors that were not brought over here in ships. What is the point in saying that if the subject matter is about one particular thing? If we're talking about apples and oranges, somebody planted an apple tree over in the yard, and another person starts talking about the coconut tree, what is the point in mentioning the coconut? That's the thing that I counteract in these videos when I primarily speak about the Atlantic slave trade that came over going west. All right. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. Let's go on, if we will, to the next part. Native American Matter, Part 4. The Arabella arrived at Salem, and that's to say in Massachusetts, in the 12th of June. The common people immediately went ashore and regaled themselves with strawberries, which are very fine in America, and were then in perfection. This might give them a favorable idea of the produce of the country, but the gentlemen met with them to fill them with concern. The first news they had was of a general conspiracy a few months before, and of all the Indians as far as Narragansett to extirpate the English. 80 persons out of about 300 had died in the colony the winter before, and many of those that remained were in a weak, sickly condition. There was not corn enough to have lasted above a fortnight, and all other provisions were scant. They had not above 3 of the 4 months to look out proper places for settlements, and to provide shelter against the severity of the winter. With the prospect of difficulties great enough for them to encounter, sickness began among them. Being destitute of necessary accommodations, they dropped away one after another. Before December, they had lost 200 of their number, including a few who had died under their passage. The governor and some of the principal persons left Salem the 17th of June and traveled through the woods to Charleston, about 20 miles, to look for a convenient place for their chief town, which they had determined should be in some part of the bay or harbor between the Casket and Cambridge. Now, all of this is talking about, brothers and sisters, inside of what we call the place of Massachusetts. What we want to show, brothers and sisters, is the map of Massachusetts and already having shown current said black images of Native Americans. So this went into the history about the Arabella, which was a ship, brothers and sisters, that was used by the people said to be at the pilgrims and so forth and so on. Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. The matter with the Dutch. Blacks were taken to Brazil by the Dutch in 1621. Blacks were taken to Manhattan by the Dutch in 1646. William Bosman, shown left, stated that he acquired captives from Dahomey land. Just want to throw that in there because we ain't going to forget about what happened from those from Africa. So while we're talking on this, I threw that in there on purpose. Let's go on, if we will, to the next part. And the slave trade. Let's look at this. I wanted to read a certain part of this. It says, this linguist was so honest. Now, when you see this thing that looks like an S in Old English is pronounced as an S, was so honest as to acquaint me with what had been proposed to him and advised me to keep a strict watch over the slaves, for though he had represented to them the same as I had done on their mutinying before, that they would be or catched again and sold to other ships in case they could carry their points and get on shore, yet it had no effect upon them. This gave me a good deal of EASI and EFS. I'm gonna just sit there and leave that word as such. I couldn't even figure that one out. Let's go on. For I knew several voyages had proved unsuccessful by mutinies, as they occasioned either in the total loss of the ship and the white men's lives, or at least by rendering it absolutely necessary to kill or wound a great number of the slaves in order to prevent a total destruction. Moreover, I knew many of these Coromantee Negroes despise punishment and even death itself. Let's stop right there. We just read of what is said there as the Coromantee Negroes. The Coromantee Negroes in this book, brothers and sisters, we want to emphasize for edification purposes, right? This comes from the year 1734 in a person's biography. And for you to be able to look that up, brothers and sisters, I want to sit there and cite the source of what I'm talking about. This comes from a book called A New Account of Guinea and the Slave Trade by William Snell Grave. Let me type that into the room. What we just read came from a book called A New Account of Guinea and the Slave Trade by William Snell Grave, 1734. Now, in this right here, there are certain things we want to point out by underlining it, right? And let's look. Several voyages, white men's lives, of the slaves, Coromantee Negroes. Why am I emphasizing this and going even slower for edification purposes, brothers and sisters, is because this right here is full hardcore evidence that the black people said to be as Negroes were said by even those in the 1730s as being shipped. So when we start talking, brothers and sisters, as some do, that the Atlantic slave trade coming west did not happen, such documentation as this needs to be pointed out. But like we said before, last night, they didn't expect people to read. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Nanny from Jamaica, a leader from Ghana. All right, and we want to use the laser pointer in this. Many of the people referred to as Coromantee or Coromantine Negroes were from Ghana. The British set up slave shops in Ghana. It is not clear how many people were transported. Pardon me. It is not clear how many people were transported out of Africa. Historians have calculated the number to be anywhere between 25 million to 70 million, including those who died in the wars and those who perished in the Middle Passage, as well as those who survived and landed in America. Now, what are we going to point out right here is where you see where the arrow pointer is at. This here, brothers and sisters, says the Ashanti. This says the Fanti. This says the Akim. This says the Aquapim. This says the Agumbo. This, brothers and sisters, partly cut off, gets into Dahomey. So we want to highlight, if we will, brothers and sisters, certain things. As we see here, Ashanti. As we see here, Fanti, brothers and sisters. As we see here, Akim. Now, not being funny, the word Akim in Hebrew means brothers. But let's go on. This right here is where many of the people at the Coromantee would have been coming from. The Ashanti that we see here, Wasal, Fanti, Akim. This here is in the current state of what we call Ghana today, brothers and sisters. The person that you see there on the upper left-hand side is a woman named Nanny, born in the 1600s and passed away in the 1700s. She was a maroon leader in Jamaica. She was one of the people that was transported by ships from Africa to what we call the place of Jamaica today. So, brothers and sisters, when we begin to sit there and talk about these kind of things, we want to show for edification purposes what we are talking about. She today is on the Jamaican currency, brothers and sisters. The money that you see in Jamaica has a picture of her on it. You understand? So this is why perhaps it may be difficult more so to try to talk to those, say, from the West Indies by saying, oh, no, the Atlantic slave trade didn't happen, when they can sit there and just talk about the currency and the money and one of the women that was in one of the slave ships. That seems to really only work on the quote said African American. You know, that's to say within the 5 states, or as they say in the islands, the states. It's kind of hard to bring that to people in Brazil. And so we could begin to see how they try to sit there and separate the said African American to the rest of the diaspora of our people throughout the Western Hemisphere. That unity is something they did not want. This is why when you go into the era of what happened with Marcus Garvey in North America, they tried to sit there and separate the said Black American from the West Indian. And sad to say, it has worked. There are channels that are set up on YouTube where said Black Americans are saying that we, Black Americans, are being displaced by West Indians. No, we are not, as a said Black American, being displaced by West Indians. What has happened is we continue to do homicide on ourselves in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in Los Angeles, just as much as Jamaica has the highest murder rate in the Western Hemisphere, or certainly the West Indies itself. That's what we're being displaced with, death and homicide and crime, unfortunately. So, brothers and sisters, once we begin to see the only difference, if we will, is that one got off the ship before the other. One in Jamaica, the other in Virginia. One in Massachusetts, the other in Barbados. One in Haiti, the other one in Louisiana. Once we begin to know and understand that particular aspect, we can sit there and see the games that have been being played against us as a people. We already know and understand the divide and conquer concept. So I want to speak upon that particular subject. Why is it perhaps having myself, for instance, coming out of Brooklyn, lived among people who are from Haiti, Jamaica, and Trinidad, and so forth and so on, and some of the spirits, if you will, that they have called or referred to anti-Black American? Some of the proposed theories is because, one, they don't see the Black American, quote unquote, as being resourceful, being reliable. And in many cases, when they get the visa or when they get the green card or when they get the resident alien card from the said white man, they are then imposed with the idea to look down on the Black American. That's a fact. This is why on this particular channel, we emphasize the aspect, if we will, that one landed in Jamaica, the other in Louisiana, one in Haiti, the other in Massachusetts. Did you know when you start talking about that ship called the Amistad, the intention of the Amistad was to first leave from Cuba, not Africa. The slave ship called the Takora left from Africa. And then they were landed in Cuba, and the Amistad was to go from Cuba to Connecticut in the 1830s, doing what they refer to still as the illegal era. So these are things we want to talk about for edification purposes. All right, next slide, please. Where tours are done regarding the slave trade in Africa. Now, why did I point this out, brothers and sisters? Because there's a theory that was going around saying, well, a lot of Africans don't even know about the slave trade. Whereas, not to be funny, many Black Americans don't even know much about Africa and Africans. So to sit there online and sit there and say that, quote, many Africans don't even know about the slave trade, as if to say the slave trade didn't happen because you want to sit there and latch on to America and their Constitution, brothers and sisters, is folly. Because we can see right there, as the people are shown there, they are given tours in Ghana where the slave trade was going on and where they still actually have the castles of the slave trade in existence. Next slide, please. The slave castle. As shown in the movie Sankofa, there are people in Africa who have tours of the slave castles. It is my belief that the, quote, conscious community focuses more on Egypt than, say, Ethiopia or even Western Africa, because they, like some of the Moors, rather paint history as if everyone was royal. Slavery is a myth. The Atlantic slave trade did not happen, and we all Black people are only indigenous to America, etc. They in Western Africa and Ethiopia have a story to tell you, quote, Black American, and that just may lead to the tribes of Israel. Again, we ask, who runs the conscious community? We want to sit there and ask that question, because when the focus is on Egypt and Egypt and Egypt and Egypt and Egypt, meanwhile, where places have Black prime ministers and Black leaders and Black presidents, why is it that they don't sit there and get the shine in many cases in the said conscious community? It's because, if my presentation stands to be correct, because they, like some, and I emphasize some, so people won't get in their feelings, even though when they talk about Israelites, they don't say some Israelites. Some Israelites don't like women. The word some does not exist when they bash the house of Israel. But yet we want to be politically correct, so we say the word some. All right? Because they, like some Moors, rather paint history as if everyone was royal. Where were the people ruling? Everything is about the gold and the finance and the trade and the leadership. That's the image that they want to sit there and portray. So everybody is a king, everybody is a pharaoh, and everybody is a queen. And it's not to say that there weren't leaders, queens, pharaohs, kings, and so forth and so on that were black, but the peasant was black too. The servant was black too. The seamstress and the teller were black as well. Everybody was not the person with the crown on. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. Next slide, please. Inside the dungeon, the captives were there. This is part of the tour that they take you in Africa. And I want to emphasize Melania Trump, who is the wife of the president of the United States, last year went in that tour. You understand? Presidents' wives before have gone in that tour. George Bush has gone in that tour in what they call the Allen Goree, or what they call the point of no return during the slave trade. In the book that is being promoted on his channel, Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68, the speech that George Bush Jr. made concerning the slave trade is documented in that book. You see, so when we start talking about the aspect of the slave trade that went west, we're not making up things off the top of our head to sound special. You're not sounding special talking about how you was oppressed in your history. It's a sad history, but it's not something to sit there and wave the flag over. We want to emphasize that for edification purposes. From the castle, the ship, to the plantation, to the ghetto and hood. Going to the sea, the ships were waiting. This is part of, even if you saw the movie Amistad, for instance, where they show the people getting off, and there will be one ship, little one, that would take them to the bigger ship. And then they were transported across the ocean. This is not made up, brothers and sisters. We already went over the aspect from a book that's called A New Account of Guinea and the Slave Trade that was written in the 1730s. The 1730s, as we mentioned earlier. We're not making these kind of things up. So what happened, we went from the ship to the plantation, be it the plantation in the West Indies or in the States, to the ghetto, be it the ghetto in the islands or the ghetto in New York or elsewhere, into the hood. Brothers and sisters. So this is part of the sad history that many people may not want to sit there and lay claim to. But we want to emphasize that there came great people from those who were taken as captives. And we're going to emphasize that as we go along in this presentation. This is why they don't want history to be noted and studied and so forth and so on. They rather it not be studied. They rather it not be spoken about. And this information is out there. It's not hidden. It's just one has to go out there and dig up for the information, him or herself. Next slide. Say what? The evidence from different sources about the enslavement of our people. Next slide. And we want to use, brothers and sisters, the laser pointer. A light-colored mulatto man named Billy or Will, property of the Honorable John Teller. When I tell to the public, that he is a fame or farm boy who for many years used to wait on me in my travels through this and the neighboring province. And it goes on and on and on and on and on about this person who ran away in slavery. This is dated, brothers and sisters, all right, to the 1770s. You can look this up yourself, brothers and sisters. I just want to read a little bit of it so we can get a picture of what we're talking about, of the ads that was made about our people during our enslavement. Next slide, please. A matter in Virginia, the 1760s. Run away from something furnace. On or about the 5th of July last, a convict servant named Arundel Carnes, the property of Honorable John Teller, and was imported into this country last April in the trail from London. He is a lad about 17 years of age, 5 feet 6 inches high. Are we reading this carefully, brothers and sisters? 17 years old? This is the kind of stuff that they were doing to 17-year-olds? You know somebody in the history of the Israelites who was taken as a captive at the age of 17? Joseph in the Bible. He was sold to the Egyptians when he was 17 years old. So when we begin to see the unfortunate situation of what happened, he is a lad about 17 years of age, 5 feet 6 inches high, very slim made, smooth face, wears his own brown hair tied behind and very short on the forehead, has gray eyes and very large dark eyebrows. On or with him when he went away, a new blue Firma pea jacket and Osnaburg and striped cotton shirt. Then it goes on and on about what the person was wearing and so forth and so on. This is something that happened with our ancestors. So you may want to look up the person Thomas Lawson in the dated era from the 1760s. The first president of the United States came to be in 1789. Slavery by then was already ingrained in the soil of the American society. You understand? Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. And it gets into the same thing just a bit more clearer for those who are interested. All right. Two known castles that held blacks as slaves. Kristineborg Castle, the Swedes, that's to say the people from Sweden, 1652. Between 1660 and 1661, it was Dutch occupied. Between 1679 and 1683, it was sold and occupied by the Portuguese, renamed Fort Saint France Javier. And between 1685 and 1689, it was remortgaged to the British. Now, I want to emphasize something and, if we will, highlight something. 1685. Can anybody take a wild guess on why I am emphasizing that year, 1685? Feel free to comment in the comment board. Why would 1685, the year, stand out? Please tell. Shalom. In the year 1685, brothers and sisters, is when the King of France, by the name of King Louis XIV, may want to look this guy up. King Louis XIV. He came with a thing called the Black Code. And this was for the French colonies during the enslavement of our ancestors. And one of the things that was mentioned in there is if you were a slave who got caught running away like twice, they would cut your ear off as a form of punishment. If you hit your slave master, you was put to death. Those are things that's inside of the Black Code that was made by King Louis the 14th concerning the people who were being enslaved under the French, also known as the Huguenots, you understand, during the era in the Western Hemisphere. That's why that year stands out. All right. Elmina Castle, Portuguese, 1482, Dutch, 1637, and English in 1872. Next slide. These are available on Amazon. Egypt talking writing. Hebrew is easy. Old Testament Israelites respond to Messianic Israelites. Deuteronomy 28 verses 15 to 68. History untold to the masses. There's a lot of history in this book, brothers and sisters, for those who are interested. Next slide, please. Just getting warmed up. Let's go. Next slide. Madison and the Federalist Papers. It was doubtless to be wished that the power of prohibiting the importation of slaves had not been postponed until the year 1808, or rather that it had been suffered to have immediate operation. But it is not difficult to account either for the restriction on the general government or for the manner in which the whole clause is expressed. It ought to be considered as a great point gained in favor of humanity that a period of 20 years may terminate forever within these states a traffic which, as so long and so loudly upbraided the barbarism of modern policy, that within that period it will receive a considerable discouragement from the federal government and may be totally abolished by the concurrence of the few states which continue the unnatural traffic and the prohibitory example which has been given by so great a majority of the Union. Happy it would be for the unfortunate Africans if an equal prospect lay for them of being redeemed from the oppressions of their European brethren. This right here comes from a thing called the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers has Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and other leaders of the United States speaking and going in discourse and writing. And in it, we see James Madison talk about the slave trade and the people who were the victims of such or were called Africans. Why do I emphasize this? Is because we wanted to show documentation, because the people who attempt to go so hard and trying to say that, oh, well, there's no evidence of the slave trade going west. Yeah. How do you explain the Federalist Papers? How do you explain the biography that's dated from 1730s? How do you, as we already asked, explain the Federalist Papers that was from the 17 and 1800s? These are things we want to point out for edification purposes. This is why, and I hate to have to say this, but this is why when a black person can sit there and want to claim to the American Constitution and say that they're not, quote, black because black means swarthy and dirty, but want to call themselves a said white man, come out there pure and so forth and so on, when you know good and well, when they saying that you black, they're trying to be insulting. And when we say that they're white, we're trying to sit there and insult them as being pale. But to sit there and try to discount your saddened history in favor of taxes to be given, in favor of grants to be given, no, I'm not taking your handout. I don't want to be known, said as the $5 Indians who took the handout from the oppressors. They accepting those casinos. If they were the true people that were already slaughtered and massacred, they wouldn't accept those casinos. Just like if the Jewish man was the true house of Israel, knowing what happened with the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, and the Caesars, you knew good and well that you wouldn't even accept that tokenism thing that you're given. That's why when they start talking about reparations for us as black people, they can't pay for it because there's no amount of money that you can sit there and give for breaking up the family. And you got to be the severe coon and the severe gold digger, not gold, but gold, G-O-L-D, the severe sit on your behind gold digger to try to sit there and say, well, reparations is a start. They can pay you something. You're going to sit there and accept the currency of things that have Washington on it, and he was a slave master. The $5 bill got Lincoln on it. His wife owned slaves. The $10 bill got Hamilton on it, and he was in the Federalist Papers talking about slavery. The $20 bill has what? Jackson on it. He was a slave master. The $100 bill, well, the $50 bill got Grant on it. Grant was a slave master. So you're accepting these kind of currencies of said rapists and slave masters for the aspect of reparations? No, brothers and sisters. No, brothers and sisters. When the Most High, not trying to play prophet, when the Most High comes through with tornadoes, ripping through the Midwest, that is the judgment of the Most High. When you understand that the tornadoes start in West Africa and hit America. Who do you think caused that? Did you know that the slave trade that happened from Western Africa and the tornadoes come from West Africa following the same route as the slave ships? Have you heard and understood that? I want to write this in the group. Did you know that the tornadoes come from Western Africa and follow the route of the slave ships? You can look that up online. That's not something that's made up. The Most High saw the ships that was going. So when you start talking about the aspect in the Bible, this is why you find a lot of people in the said conscious community trying to bash the Bible because they know what it's about at the end of the day. You understand? It says that Israel is holiness to the Most High. All that have offended him shall be held guilty. So when you got this so-called conscious dude that's claiming Kemet, the same land that the European want to claim with the Pyramid of Giza and everything like that, got one Israelite, 2, 3, 4 Israelites talking about, I want to read part of the Bible to you, and then you answer the questions based upon it. Why do you think that these kind of so-called communities are set up? Why do you think that you got a so-called conscious person selling fake real estate to people years ago was the same one shooting the Bible? This is why it's not good, O house of Israel, to float like a platypus, or as my daughter may say, a jellyfish, from channel to channel, from channel to channel online like that. We don't need to entertain as Israelites any so-called scholar that's up there shooting the Bible talking about we want to hear your story. That is ridiculous, brothers and sisters. You understand? So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to sit there and talk about for edification purposes. Before YouTube existed, the knowledge of Israel was already out there in the 1970s and 80s. So we don't have to sit there and say, I must be on this channel for views, because if the Most High will let it spread, it will spread. This is his work. You understand? So, brothers and sisters, getting back, if we will, into this particular aspect, right? It says what? Unfortunate Africans. And he's talking about in that the slave trade and about how, brothers and sisters, it has been postponed until the year 1808, or rather that it is supposed to be it had been suffered to have immediate operation, but it is not difficult to account either for the restriction on the general government or for the manner in which the whole clause is expressed. It ought to be considered as a great point gained in favor of humanity that the period of 20 years may terminate forever within, as stated, these states. What is he talking about, brothers and sisters? He's talking about the slave trade being terminated and restarted in these states. What states are we talking about? They're talking about America. Next slide. Now, let's get into some modern times, if we will. Now, this has happened just like this month. Ruby Howell and Jessica and Franklin Richardson in Mississippi. This is hitting the news and everything like that. Ruby Howell is said to be on Facebook talking about she supports the Confederate flag. Okay. She's in Mississippi. Did you know Mississippi didn't turn in their papers to be declared a free state until the year 2012 and the year 2013? That means when the rap stars was all out in the 80s, Mississippi was still legally known in the government as a slave state. The reason why, in part, Mississippi in 2012 and 2013 turned in their papers to the United States to be declared a not slave state or a non-slave state is because of the movie that Steven Spielberg did called Lincoln. Brothers and sisters, I was in my 30s when this happened. My little girl was already born in the year 2006. She was born while part of America was still called a slave state. And that state was called Mississippi and is called Mississippi. I want to emphasize again, my little girl, who's now only 12, she was born while Mississippi was still under the aspect of being called a slave state. We have parents that have died, brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers alike, that have died while Mississippi is still not at that time declared a free state. So this is what we're living in. So when we begin to see situations like Ruby Howell with, as we want to point out right there, see what that is right there? That's a gun, brothers and sisters. And we want to circle this. She pulled a gun out, brothers and sisters, on a couple that we see right here. Now people are saying, well, she got fired, so yay. Okay, she got fired from her job for what she did. But what is she going to do when she goes home? If she has children, she's going to teach her children hate the people who look like Jessica and Franklin. This woman may have children, and she may instill in her children the same thing that was instilled in her. Do we see what we're dealing with, brothers and sisters? This is just this month in 2019, when we're planning trips to go to Atlantic City, and we're planning outings with our families when we want to take our little girls out because her birthday's coming up. This is still going on in the United States of America. This is still going on in the United States of America. So I'm not really one, no disrespect, with the teaching of all humanity and we all one. No, because Ruby Howell knows that she ain't the same as that couple. Her parents taught her that, and if she got children, definitely believe if she's in broad daylight pulling the burner out, this is a woman, an elder at that, if you will. She's pulling a gat, a burner, a piece out on a couple. So it's difficult for me with this just happening in the past 2 weeks. It's difficult for me to sit there and understand we all should be under one umbrella. No, because they're not teaching their children that. That lady Ruby Howell would never been known had it not been for this situation right here. That guy in 2015 who went in South Carolina in the church and shot the people up named Dylan Roof. Who taught Dylan Roof that? And that dude was only 21 years old at the time. People probably as old as Ruby Howell taught the people, such as Dylan Roof, what to do when you see the Negroes. You pull your burner out on these niggas. That's what's going on in this kind of situation, brothers and sisters. Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. The cop and Omar Rahman. We want to point out that we are not loved in this society. These presentations are not done to sadden, but rather to enlighten and inspire us to gather and respect each other. See, in the Bible, for instance, right, in Hosea chapter 4, verse 8, it says, they eat at the sin of my people. Who are they? The nations. They sit down and they are fed because we don't live right one with another. So once we begin to love one another, true love, not fake love, not sitting up there, hey, boss, I was making it on time, but you tell an Israelite brother or sister, F you got to be out of your mind. You can sit there and be okay, not being united with your brothers and sisters, while you go to people whose brother is probably the one up there with a thumbs up saying this nigga is dead. We want to understand what kind of man we're dealing with when we deal with this particular subject matter. This is what we're dealing with, brothers and sisters. He has his, as shown there, thumbs up, holding the arm of a man while he's in gloves. Maybe he was part of the medic in the down low or whatever in the world. as if to sit there and say, yeah, he dead. In the Bible, in Exodus, the Pharaoh was noted as saying, kill the males and leave the daughters alive. You see why we say Egypt began by ships is this here? Next slide. White serial killers and black inventors. Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Gary Ridgway, Edmund Kemper, David Berkowitz, Dennis Rader, Harold Shipman, Charles Cullen, James Brudos, William Bowman. Everybody you see there, all like 10 people on the left-hand side, are all serial killers. Some of them still alive doing life in jail. Now let's look at, brothers and sisters, the list of black inventors. So that way we can begin to see what we should aspire to as a people. George Washington Carver, he dealt with the soil. Garrett Morgan, the smoke hood. Lewis Howard Latimer, the light bulb and the phone patent. Granville T. Woods, multiplex telegraph. Otis Boykin, wire resistor. Benjamin Banneker, designer of Washington, D.C. He also was the same one who had the first wooden clock made in America. Thomas Jennings, abolitionist, patent of dry cleaning. Alexander Miles, patent of automatic open and close elevator doors. Percy Levon Julian, the chemist, used natural herbs for glaucoma. And Dr. Charles Drew, who was famous for the first open heart surgery in the matter with blood plasma. These are men, may they rest in peace, who can be looked up and aspired to be like. Now let's look and see the point in mentioning this. We want to point out that yes, sports is not bad, but when entertainment is praised more than scholarship, diligence, and production, that is the problem. People did not like when a Muslim woman, Shahrazad Ali, in her book that she wrote in the 1990s called The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man, she said in that book that the black man is not respected, not due to slavery, but due to the fact that he's unproductive. Shahrazad Ali, in her book, The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man, she said the black woman is left unprotected, and she is the only female left unprotected by the male of her species. So this is why we want to more so highlight, if you will, black men in history that were inventors, and not trying to bash them, but we got to be known them more than just football and basketball. We got to do better, black men, brothers, elders, youth, brothers that's becoming men. We can't aspire to all be basketball players. And there's nothing wrong with basketball. There's nothing wrong really with football besides the fact they throw a pig thing going around. You understand? But the point I want to emphasize is that when we are more so known for sports and entertainment, and that is the standard image of the black man, as opposed to being known as the scholars and the producers of certain things, we got to step up our game, brothers. That is the point in that. The lady Shahrazad Ali, when she was on the Phil Donahue show, she said, in quote, if you take away basketball and baseball and football, where is the black man? Some people may not like that statement. Some people may agree with that statement. But what we have to do as black men, being asked by a black woman, where are we at? If you take away basketball and football, she deserves an answer. But when you have it to where, like if you see the movie, I think with forgot the guy's name, but it was Coach Carter, was it? And they rather the students be more accepted, and once it came down to sports than grades, then sports than school. You understand? This is not a disrespect to Satchel Paige, Jackie Robinson, or any of these other men that did break barriers. But brothers and sisters, when we have a generation that rather, quote, be like Mike, that's the problem. What we need, brothers and sisters, is more Dr. Charles Drews. What we need, brothers and sisters, is more people by the name, I'm trying to remember, Johnny Cochran and the Cochran firm. We need those kind of things. We already have enough Magics, enough Jordans. We already have enough Pippins and Ewings. All you got to do is go to the Rutgers in Harlem. All you got to do is go to West 4th where they playing basketball in downtown Manhattan. Them brothers can play very well. But what are we doing to step it up in the other aspects of life, black man? That's what this particular slide is about. Because the image that they're portraying of black men is the black image of the people on the left-hand side. So instead of Jeffrey Dahmer, you got Alpo. Instead of John Wayne Gacy, you have the original 50 Cent out of Brooklyn. Instead of Gary Ridgway, brothers and sisters, you have the DC snipers. Do you understand the point of this particular slide and this particular part of the presentation? Instead of Dennis Rader, they have, brothers and sisters, Frank Lucas. The only time the black and the white man is equated is when the black man is living unrighteous. See, when the black man is living like the ones that we see on the right-hand side, such as George Washington Carver, Otis Boykin, Benjamin Banneker, Charles Drew, and so forth and so on, the white man can't top what those men did. Those men there are not on the same even level of the white inventors because what they did helped make America great, if you want to talk about America being great. You understand? We got to sit there and change our image. It just can't be grabbing a basketball. Next slide, please. Genocide, 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 and genocide. And I'm going to say it again to cover up the one with the belts. Genocide again. Black women take care of their families by taking care of themselves. Abortion is self-care. And look, you got the daughters of Margaret Sanger up there smiling. You know who Margaret Sanger was? The one who helped encourage the thing called Planned Parenthood, where they sit there and promote abortions. Black women take care of their families. How? By killing them? That's madness, brothers and sisters. Abortion is self-care. So don't worry about the future. Worry about yourself, girl. Don't let that baby tie you down. Don't sit there and have the baby and hire a young sister to be the nurse and the babysitter. Just kill that baby. Get that baby put in that vacuum, and we're going to take this thing and shave the vaginal walls from other parts that sat there and was left behind. From kill the males and leave the daughters alive to let them be encouraged to slay themselves. Black gay men matter to God. I don't know what God you're talking about, because the God that's talked about on this channel, Yah, does not support gayness. And I'm not talking anti-happy. I'm talking the Most High does not support homosexuality. Never did support homosexuality. Never was about homosexuality. Never entertained homosexuality. So while they up there showing the black men as gay, homosexual, they are showing the black woman killing off her offspring. Genocide. One, the man not producing because a man and man don't make nothing. And well, women, if you happen to just need to get your itch taken care of and he happens to ejaculate, all you got to do is just cut off that baby's existence by putting you on this gurney, this stretcher. We're going to strap you in, have you bent over toward that side, and we're going to put this vacuum and suck the baby out. But you can't see it though because it seems too harsh. So we're going to take this jar after we scrape your vaginal walls and take it in the back room. And then you go on and you get your career because you ain't going to let that little nigga out your vagina stop you. Real talk. Real talk, Israel. That's what this right here is promoting. So when we get into this kind of subject, we can see, brothers and sisters, and we want to emphasize this for edification purposes. Brothers and sisters, just this past month or this month, We got this lady holding the burner, the gap, the piece, whatever you want to call it, the gun, to a couple, a man and woman. See, Ruby Howell knows that Jessica Richardson is not her daughter. She's not accepted in the park, much less in her house. You understand what we're talking about, brothers and sisters? So while they trying to sit there, well, if we didn't get all of them, I'm gonna pull this gat out and I may have to shoot them. That's one aspect. Then they show one happy that one is dead. Then we're looking at this particular aspect right here when, well, we got them committing genocide on themselves because a man and a man don't produce a baby. And if she happens to get pregnant by one of these men, well, we're going to push abortion. Genocide, brothers and sisters. Abortion and homosexuality, aka genocide. Next slide, please. Abortion is not good. And I want to show that for edification purposes. Women, do you think that you want that to be coming up outside of you? See, for all of those who may have had an abortion, they probably didn't show you what was inside the jar, but that's how it looks, in part. See, they don't even support the aspect of a midwife, or even a nurse or a daycare center, where sometimes I can say for myself, I was around the babysitter more than my own parents in many cases between the ages of 6 to 10. That's an unfortunate reality, but at least I'm thankful to the Most High that the babysitter I had was named Emo Yisrael, so I knew I can eat anything out of her house, raised as an Israelite. But when you already are known to not have a community structure, and sadly to say, when you're already known as being entertainers and basketball and football players, this is what is going to be offered to you. Homosexuality, murder, and abortion. Not a daycare center for the children whose parents have to now get 2 jobs if the man wasn't there. Not an after-school workshop for the little boys and girls. But no, their solution is abortion. So when you find Black women, and I hate to have to say that so, but it is what it is, that are in their feelings, oh, they have an anti-abortion law. And that's really because the white population is decreasing. Don't you see? If they are making anti-abortion laws because the white population is decreasing, don't you got to sit there and give it up to the white people because they know their numbers are decreasing and they don't want to be extinct? That's something to actually commend another person on this earth for. For you want to sit there and go and be surviving, I can't hate the white man for that. For making a law saying no more abortions because we need to sit there and multiply more. But you got sisters who are so hell-bent on sitting up there and this is oppressive. And if more women were giving birth, more women will die. You're selfish. Brothers and sisters. Or in this case, sisters. You're selfish. Because you don't want to sit there and be, quote, tied down with this baby. So you rather sit there and have it aborted from your system. I want to read something later on. Let's go on to the next slide. From baby to man, brothers and sisters. This is me giving thanks to the Most High as a baby in the 1980s, like 1980, 1981. This is me here as a grown man in 2017, in the back cover of one of the books that I wrote. From baby to man, I am thankful my mother did not abort me. There were several times my mother had to leave me in the care of my uncle, in the care of the babysitter, in the care of a family member. But never did she sit back and think, oh, I'm just going to get rid of this child. I don't love this child no more. Or this baby's going to hold me up. No. When we were younger, I can say when I was a baby, I was born to a mother who was living on welfare at the time. 6 months after my birth, my mother started working in the parks department. 6 years after my birth, my mother started working for the transit authority. Sometimes having the children will make you want to step your game up. But when you have a generation that's more so about basketball and football, it's easy to tell them to just go and live your career and abort your children because they ain't aspiring to nothing but just, sorry to have to say it, hold the balls in their hands. No pun intended. Psalms 127, verse 3. Lo, behold, children are an heritage of the Most High, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. Behold, children are an heritage from the Most High. That's why, brothers and sisters, when you go in Ezekiel chapter 20, and it speaks about the children that were being offered up to Molech, which was a god that the people worshiped by murdering their own children, like what is done in abortion. The Most High said, you have slain my sons and my daughters. So the land of Israel needs its rest. So all of these abortions that's being promoted and everything of that sort, don't wonder why you got judgment coming upon this land the way that it does. Tornadoes here, fires over there, the economy's bad over there, murder is over there, crime is over there. That is the Most High turning it upon them for their wickedness. That is why it's time for Jacob to wake up and for us to come back to our true understanding of self. And it is not by abortion, it is by life and production. Black men, we got to show ourselves to be more of producers. Sisters, I'm not saying your only purpose is to give birth, but that is one of the main things that women of understanding want to be able to do. Next slide. These are available on Amazon, as been pointed out before. How to get the books we talked about. Get all 4 of them for $70, signed by me and shipped via FedEx. You can go into PayPal, hkashub@yahoo.com, HKASHUB@yahoo.com. Telephone number 908-587-4841. Brothers and sisters, giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. Any questions or comments concerning this presentation? I can be reached by telephone, by text, or call at 908-587-4841. And as stated, this is uploaded books available for those who want them, part 2. These are the books that we are talking about. Did the Torah come from the culture of Tameri? Hebrew is easy. Old Testament Israelites respond to Messianic Israelites. And Deuteronomy 28:15-68. Last night on this channel, we went more so into the content of the books. But this presentation tonight, I wanted to show more of the content of the book. But everything that we went over is in the appendix of some of those parts of those books. All right? Shalom.